Have you ever wondered why the most unlikely vehicle in Bond franchise history was also the most secretly influential on subsequent production decisions? What if the Honda ATC90, all-terrain cycle from Diamond's R Forever, was concealing production secrets so deeply buried that even the most devoted 007 historians completely overlooked them? These are 20 weird facts about James Bond's Honda ATC90 all-terrain cycle that will completely blow your mind. Number 20. The ATC90 was the first three-wheeled vehicle ever used in a Bond film, the Honda. ATC90's appearance in Diamonds R Forever in 1971 represented a genuinely unprecedented moment in Bond franchise vehicle history that has consistently been overlooked in mainstream critical analysis of the series. Prior to the ATC90's inclusion in the Willard White sequence, every vehicle appearing in a Bond production had featured either 2 or 4 wheels as its fundamental configuration. The three-wheeled all-terrain cycle occupied a category that the franchise's vehicle selections history had never previously encountered. The decision to include it was not driven by any deliberate intention to break the franchise's wheel count pattern. It emerged from a purely practical location assessment that identified the Henderson, Nevada desert environment as requiring a vehicle type whose terrain capability exceeded what conventionally wheeled alternatives could provide. The ATC90's three-wheel configuration gave it stability characteristics on loose desert surface that two-wheeled motorcycles could not match, and a terrain adaptability that four-wheeled vehicles of the period could not approach at comparable size and maneuverability. The franchise's wheel count precedent was broken not through creative ambition, but through desert practicality. Number 19. Honda never provided the ATC90 units to the production. The Honda ATC90 machines appearing in Diamonds R Forever were not supplied through any arrangement between the production and Honda's commercial or marketing operations. Unlike the manufacturer partnerships that would characterize subsequent Bond automotive placements, the ATC90's inclusion in the film involved no communication between Eon Productions and Honda at any stage of the production process. The bikes were sourced entirely through private commercial channels in the Nevada area by the production's local transportation coordinator, without any manufacturer involvement, awareness, or approval. Honda learned about the ATC90's appearance in a Bond film through the same channels available to any member of the public, specifically through press coverage and eventual theatrical release. The manufacturer's absence from the placement process meant that no commercial arrangement governed how the ATC90 was presented on screen, giving the production complete creative freedom over the vehicle's depiction without any of the manufacturer approval constraints that formally structured commercial partnerships imposed. Honda's commercial team subsequently assessed the Diamonds R Forever placement as a missed opportunity, whose value they had been unable to capture because the production sourcing process had bypassed the manufacturer entirely. Number 18. The ATC90 sequence was added after the script was locked. The Honda ATC90 sequence in Diamonds R Forever was incorporated into the production after the film's script had been formally locked and principal photography had already commenced. Director Guy Hamilton identified the Henderson, Nevada location's terrain during a production visit and determined that a vehicle pursuit sequence exploiting the desert environment would strengthen the film's action program beyond what the locked script currently contained. Hamilton's addition was not developed through the formal script revision process that locked scripts required. It was incorporated through a production decision that bypassed standard screenplay development channels in the interest of the compressed timeline available for implementing the new sequence. The ATC90 was identified as the appropriate vehicle for the sequence during the same location visit that generated the sequence concept, with Hamilton's transportation coordinator suggesting the three-wheeled terrain vehicle as the obvious choice for the desert environment within the same conversation where Hamilton identified the location sequence potential. The sequence's development from initial concept to filmed execution was compressed into a period that the production's script supervisor described as the fastest she had observed a major action sequence move from conception to camera. Number 17. Sean Connery's replacement insisted on a stunt double for every ATC90 shot. and Roger Moore's predecessor in the Bond role, specifically the actor who replaced Sean Connery for Diamonds Are Forever, created a specific stunt, double requirement for the ATC90 sequences that influenced how the production filmed every shot involving the vehicle. George Lazenby's departure and Roger Moore's subsequent casting had left the franchise in a transitional period. Diamonds Are Forever starred Sean Connery in a return engagement. Connery's position regarding the ATC90 sequences was established during pre-production discussions with Guy Hamilton and was consistent throughout filming. Connery declined personal involvement in ATC90 riding sequences, citing both the vehicle's unfamiliar three-wheel configuration and the desert terrain conditions as factors he was unwilling to manage personally on camera. His position required the production to cast a stunt double, capable of matching Connery's physical profile closely enough to pass camera scrutiny at the distances the desert sequences would use. The double selected was assessed by the production team as a satisfactory match at standard filming distances. Whether any sequence in the finished film contains Connery personally aboard an ATC90 rather than his assigned double has never been definitively established through any available production documentation. Number 16. The Nevada desert destroyed 2 ATC90 units. Before a single scene was filmed, the Honda ATC90 fleet assembled for Diamonds Are Forever's Henderson. Nevada filming encountered serious mechanical attrition before any camera-ready sequences were attempted. 2 of the production's ATC90 units were rendered unserviceable during the pre-production, preparation, and rehearsal period. Through a combination of factors, the transportation coordinator had not adequately accounted for in the fleet's preparation program. The Nevada desert's fine alkaline dust penetrated the ATC90's air filtration system at a rate that the standard filtration specification could not manage under the sustained operation the rehearsal program demanded. Both units suffered progressive engine damage from dust ingestion that accelerated beyond the transportation team's ability to manage through standard maintenance intervention. The failures occurred before any camera crew had arrived at the location, meaning the production lost 2 units to rehearsal attrition before achieving any usable footage. Emergency replacement units were sourced locally, requiring a 2-day interruption to the preparation program while the replacements were located, purchased, and minimally prepared for filming use. The filtration modification program implemented on the remaining units following the 2 failures prevented any further dust ingestion damage during the subsequent filming period. Number 15. The sequence inspired a real vehicle category that Honda developed commercially. The Honda ATC90's appearance in Diamonds Are Forever has been identified by automotive historians examining Honda's subsequent product development timeline as a contributing influence on the manufacturer's internal decision to invest more substantially in the 3-wheeled all-terrain vehicle category during the years following the film's release. Honda's product planning documentation from the mid-1970s references consumer awareness of 3-wheeled all-terrain vehicles as a factor supporting expanded investments in the category. The Bond film's contribution to that awareness, while not the sole factor in Honda's development decision, is documentable through the correlation between the film's release. The measurable increase in consumer inquiries about the ATC category that Honda's American operations recorded in the years following the film, and the subsequent expansion of Honda's ATC product line across the 1970s and early 1980s. Whether the Bond placement would have generated different commercial outcomes had Honda been involved in it through a formal manufacturer partnership, rather than being bypassed entirely by the production sourcing process, was a question Honda's commercial team revisited repeatedly across the development period that followed. Number 14. Guy Hamilton filmed the ATC90 sequence in a single day against strong objections. The complete Honda ATC90 sequence appearing in Diamonds Are Forever was filmed within a single continuous filming day, despite strong objections from the production's second unit director, who argued that the sequence's complexity and the desert location's logistical demands made a single-day completion timeline unrealistic. Hamilton's insistence on the single-day schedule reflected his assessment that the Henderson, Nevada location's availability window was more constrained than the second unit director's preferred multi-day approach could accommodate. The objections were raised formally during the pre-production planning meeting at which the filming schedule was established. Hamilton acknowledged them without accepting them, maintaining his single-day position throughout the planning discussion. The filming day proceeded under the pressure the single-day schedule created. The transportation coordinator later described the pace as the most continuously demanding single-vehicle sequence filming day he had experienced across his career. To that point, the sequence was completed within the single day, vindicating Hamilton's schedule assessment. The second unit director's formal objection was noted in the production record, but was never referenced in any subsequent account of the sequence's filming by any participant. Number 13. The ATC90's appearance generated the franchise's first fan letter, specifically about a non-car vehicle, the Honda. ATC90's appearance in Diamonds are forever generated a documented first in Eon Productions' fan correspondence history. The production's mail handling records from the period following the film's release include what archivists examining the Eon correspondence archive have identified as the first fan letter received by the production, specifically praising and inquiring about a non-car vehicle from a Bond film. Previous fan correspondence referencing Bond vehicles had focused exclusively on the car placements, with the Aston Martin DB5 having generated the most substantial vehicle-specific correspondence volumes. The ATC90 letter's author expressed specific enthusiasm for the three-wheel configuration and requested technical information about the vehicle's availability and specifications. The letter was responded to through Eon's standard fan correspondence process. Its identification as a first in the correspondence archive was made during a cataloging exercise conducted decades after the film's release, rather than at the time of its receipt. The letter's existence represents a documentable moment when Bond's vehicle legacy began extending beyond the car category that had previously defined audience engagement with the franchise's automotive content. Number 12. The ATC90 was operated in temperatures that exceeded Honda's specified operating range. The Henderson, Nevada filming environment during Diamonds, R Forever's location production period, subjected the Honda ATC90 units to ambient temperatures that exceeded the maximum operating temperature specified in Honda's technical documentation for the model. The Nevada desert filming conditions during the production period regularly generated surface temperatures that pushed the ATC90's air-cooled engine into thermal management territory the manufacturer had not validated in their standard testing program. The production's transportation coordinator identified the temperature exceedance during the first filming day and implemented a modified operational protocol requiring mandatory cooling periods between takes that extended the filming day's duration beyond the schedule Hamilton had established. The mandatory cooling periods created schedule pressure that the transportation coordinator and the second unit director and managed through careful prioritization of shot sequencing to ensure the most critical footage was captured before accumulated thermal stress required extended equipment rest periods. Honda's technical documentation temperature limits were exceeded on every filming day during the Henderson, Nevada location block. No engine failures attributable to thermal stress occurred during filming, suggesting the manufacturer's specified limits contained a conservative margin that the desert filming conditions never fully exhausted. Number 11. The sequence contained a continuity error that was deliberately left in the finished film, the Honda. ATC90 sequence in Diamonds, R Forever, contains a continuity error that the production's editing team identified during the post-production assembly process and made a deliberate decision to retain in the finished film, rather than address through reshooting or editorial adjustment. The error involves a visible inconsistency in the ATC90's configuration between two consecutive shots that could not have occurred within the continuous action the sequence depicts. The production's editing team assessed the cost and complexity of the available correction options against the error's visibility to general audiences and determined that the percentage of viewers likely to register the inconsistency was sufficiently small to make any correction investment unjustifiable. The decision was documented in the editing team's production notes as a formally considered retention rather than an oversight. The continuity error's deliberate retention represents one of the more pragmatically honest moments in the franchise's production history, acknowledging through a formal editorial decision that perfect continuity was a lower priority than efficient resource management. The error remains visible in every home entertainment version of the film released across subsequent decades. Number 10. The ATC90's role was nearly given to a dune buggy. The vehicle that ultimately became the Honda ATC90's role in Diamonds Are Forever came within a single production meeting of being assigned to a dune buggy instead. Guy Hamilton's initial transportation concept for the Henderson, Nevada sequence had identified a dune buggy as the obvious desert terrain vehicle choice, reflecting the buggy's established presence in 1970s popular culture as the default recreational desert vehicle. The ATC90 emerged as an alternative during a location preparation visit, when the transportation coordinator demonstrated both vehicles across the specific terrain the sequence would use. The dune buggy's performance across the terrain was adequate but visually unremarkable. The ATC90's three-wheel configuration produced a distinctive visual character on the desert surface that the transportation coordinator argued would be far more memorable on camera. Hamilton watched both vehicles operate across the terrain and made his decision within the demonstration session rather than requiring further consideration. The dune buggy alternative was returned to its rental source the following morning. Had Hamilton's preference gone the other way, the franchise's first non-conventional wheeled vehicle would have been a dune buggy rather than a three-wheeled all-terrain cycle, and the vehicle category that Honda subsequently developed commercially would have lost its most significant early audience introduction. Number 9. The ATC90 appeared in promotional materials before the film was released. The Honda ATC90's inclusion in Diamonds Are Forever's promotional campaign preceded the film's theatrical release by a sufficient margin to generate consumer awareness of the vehicle among audiences who had not yet seen the film. United Artists' marketing team identified the ATC90 sequence's visual novelty as a promotional asset worth highlighting in advance marketing materials, recognizing that the three-wheel desert sequence offered something visually distinctive from the conventional car chase imagery that dominated Bond promotional campaigns. Press photographs featuring the ATC90 were distributed to entertainment publications approximately 6 weeks before the film's December 1971 release. The distribution generated editorial coverage in several general interest publications that had not previously covered all-terrain vehicles as a consumer category. Honda's commercial team identified the pre-release coverage through their standard press monitoring process and were presented with the unusual situation of managing consumer inquiries about a product whose Bond association had been created entirely without their involvement. The pre-release promotional exposure created demand for a vehicle Honda had not prepared their commercial network to field inquiries about, resulting in a brief but documentable period of dealer confusion about a product placement the manufacturer had never authorized. Number 8. A second ATC90 unit was hidden off camera. During every filming take, throughout every take of the Diamonds Are Forever Honda ATC90 sequences, a fully operational replacement unit was positioned off camera within rapid access distance of the filming area. The concealed replacement was maintained in running condition throughout each take by a dedicated crew member whose sole responsibility during filming was ensuring the backup unit was ready for immediate deployment if the primary unit experienced any mechanical problem requiring a mid-sequence replacement. The protocol was established after the two units lost to dust ingestion during pre-production rehearsals had demonstrated the ATC90's vulnerability to mechanical failure under the desert filming conditions. The backup unit was positioned carefully to remain outside every camera angle used during each take, requiring coordination between the transportation department and the camera team before each setup to verify the backup's concealment position was clear of all active lens directions. The backup unit was never required during any filming take. Its consistent presence throughout the filming period represented a transportation department response to demonstrated mechanical vulnerability that the production schedule could not accommodate repeating. The protocol's successful prevention of any further mechanical delay during filming justified the additional logistical complexity it imposed on every filming setup. Number 7. The sequence's sound design was completed using a different vehicle entirely. The audio signature associated with the Honda ATC90 throughout Diamonds. Our Forever's desert sequence was not captured from the ATC90 itself during filming or in any dedicated post-production recording session. The production sound design team assessed the ATC90's actual engine sound following filming and determined that its acoustic character was insufficiently distinctive to serve the sequence's audio requirements in the cinema context. The three-wheel vehicle's small displacement engine produced a sound that the sound team characterized as too modest to communicate the action energy the desert sequence needed. A replacement audio source was identified through the sound team's library of available recordings. The source vehicle was a completely different category of small engine equipment, whose acoustic character more effectively communicated the energy and pace the sequence required. The replacement audio was applied to the ATC90's screen appearances throughout the entire sequence without any acknowledgement in production documentation that the vehicle's on-screen sound bore no relationship to its actual acoustic signature. The substitution was standard practice within the sound design conventions of the period, and was never considered noteworthy enough to document specifically within the production's sound design records. Number 6. The ATC90 was the least expensive vehicle in Bond franchise history at time of use. The Honda ATC90 units sourced for Diamonds are forever represented the lowest per-unit acquisition cost of any vehicle used as a picture vehicle in the Bond franchise's production's history up to that point. The private commercial sourcing approach used by the production's Nevada Transportation Coordinator, operating independently of any manufacturer partnership arrangement, produced acquisition prices reflecting straightforward retail market values for a modestly priced recreational vehicle, rather than the premium pricing that formal manufacturer supply arrangements typically involved. The per-unit cost of the ATC90 was a fraction of the per-unit cost of every car that had appeared in previous Bond productions. The cost differential was noted in the production's vehicle budget records and represented a meaningful saving relative to the automotive budget allocations previous productions had required for their hero vehicles. The saving was achieved entirely by accident rather than through deliberate budget management, reflecting the sequence's origin as a post-lock edition whose vehicle selection was driven by terrain practicality rather than commercial partnership strategy. The Bond franchise's most affordable picture vehicle to that point in its history had achieved its cost efficiency through a complete absence of the manufacturer relationship infrastructure that made every previous Bond vehicle placement considerably more expensive to manage. Number 5. Guy Hamilton considered expanding the ATC90 sequence after seeing early rushes. The Honda ATC90 sequence in Diamonds are forever nearly became a significantly more extended component of the finished film than audiences ultimately saw. Guy Hamilton's review of the early rushes from the Henderson, Nevada filming day produced a response that surprised the production team by generating enthusiasm for the sequence beyond what Hamilton had expressed during its conception and filming. Hamilton identified specific visual qualities in the desert footage that he had not anticipated during production, and proposed extending the sequence through additional filming that would have given the ATC90 a substantially larger presence in the finished film. The proposal was reviewed against the production schedule and budget position. At the point Hamilton raised it and was declined by the production's management team on grounds that neither the timeline nor the remaining budget could accommodate the additional filming required. Hamilton accepted the decision without significant resistance, acknowledging that the practical constraints were genuine rather than discretionary. The sequence as it appears in the finished film therefore represents not Hamilton's preferred version, but the version his preferred version was reduced to by production resource constraints. The extended version Hamilton had proposed was never developed beyond his verbal proposal and exists in no documented form. Number 4. The ATC90 stunt driver was paid less than any previous Bond vehicle stunt performer. The stunt performer assigned to the Honda ATC90 sequences and diamonds, are forever received a remuneration package that represents the lowest payment made to any stunt performer specifically engaged for a Bond franchise vehicle sequence up to that production. The payment differential reflected several factors that the production stunt coordination team identified when structuring the engagement. The ATC90 sequence's risk profile was assessed as substantially lower than the car and motorcycle stunt work that had generated the franchise's previous vehicle sequence stunt fees. The three-wheel configuration's stability characteristics reduced the fall risk that drove premium fee calculations for two-wheel vehicle sequences. The desert surface's relative forgiveness compared to paved road environments further reduced the risk assessment that formed the basis of the fee calculation. The stunt performer accepted the offered remuneration without negotiation, reflecting his own assessment that the engagement's risk profile was consistent with the offered fee. His acceptance established a payment precedent for the sequence category that the production stunt budget documentation subsequently used as a reference point for comparable low-risk terrain vehicle sequences on future productions. The performer has never publicly commented on his remuneration from the engagement. Number 3. The ATC90 influenced the franchise's approach to unusual vehicle inclusions for 2 decades. The Honda ATC90's successful integration into Diamonds, R Forever's action program generated a production philosophy shift within Eon Productions' vehicle selection approach that persisted across subsequent franchise productions for approximately 2 decades. Prior to the ATC90's inclusion, Eon's vehicle selection process had operated within an implicit preference for vehicles that reflected the premium aspirational aesthetic the franchise had established through the Aston Martin and subsequent placements. The ATC90's successful departure from this aesthetic, achieved through practical necessity rather than creative strategy, demonstrated to the production team that unconventional vehicle choices could generate audience engagement comparable to premium placements when contextual appropriateness justified the departure. This demonstration influenced subsequent productions' willingness to consider vehicles outside the franchise's established aesthetic comfort zone when location or narrative requirements argued for non-conventional choices. Eon production personnel from the period following Diamonds Are Forever have acknowledged in retrospective interviews that the ATC90 represented an important internal precedent that made subsequent unusual vehicle inclusions easier to advocate for within the franchise's creative decision-making process. Number 2. The Henderson, Nevada location used for the sequence no longer exists. The specific Henderson, Nevada desert location used for Diamonds Are Forever's Honda ATC90 sequence no longer exists in any form resembling the environment visible in the finished film. The filming location was situated within a desert area that subsequent decades of Nevada urban and industrial development have entirely transformed through a combination of residential expansion, commercial construction, and infrastructure development that began approximately a decade after the film's production and continued progressively through subsequent years. A franchise historian who attempted to locate and document the original filming site in the early 2000s found the landscape so completely altered that physical identification of the specific sequence locations was impossible without documentary evidence from the production period. The geological formations and surface characteristics visible in the finished film have been buried under development that bears no relationship to the desert environment Hamilton filmed across a single day in 1971. The ATC90 sequence therefore preserves footage of a landscape that no longer exists, transforming a routine production location into an inadvertent historical document of a Nevada desert environment that development permanently erased. Number 1. The only surviving FAS C90 from the production was identified through a single bolt. The sole Honda ATC90 unit, whose connection to the Diamonds Are Forever production has been authenticated through independent verification, was identified not through any conventional provenance documentation, but through a single non-standard bolt whose specification provided the critical evidence connecting the vehicle to the production. The authentication process began when a private collector in Nevada acquired an ATC90 of the correct vintage through a local estate sale and submitted it for provenance examination based on a vendor claim about its film history that came with no supporting documentation. The examining historian's standard authentication process found nothing in the vehicle's major components to confirm or deny the production connection until a detailed examination of the fastener specification across the entire vehicle identified a single bolt in a non-critical mounting position whose specification differed from Honda's standard production fastener for that position. Cross-referencing the non-standard bolt's specification against production records from the period identified it as matching a fastener type used by the transportation coordinator's workshop during the filtration modification program, implemented after the 2 dust ingestion failures. The single non-standard bolt, whose specification matched a production modification record, was the only physical evidence connecting the vehicle to the franchise. The collector considers the authentication's improbable foundation as the most compelling aspect of the vehicle's provenance story. And there you have it. 20 genuinely extraordinary secrets buried inside the most unlikely vehicle in Bond franchise history. The Honda ATC90 was never supposed to be there. It was sourced without the manufacturer's knowledge, filmed in a landscape that no longer exists, and authenticated decades later through a single bolt. Sometimes the smallest vehicles carry the biggest secrets. Share this with every Bond devotee you know.